Welcome back to the third music theory lesson on pitch, and welcome back to those of you who are confident enough in your knowledge of treble and bass clefs to skip lessons 1 and 2. I think you'll find material here that will be very useful to you in your quest to pass grade 5 music theory. But before we start with the 2 new clefs you need for grade 5 theory, just a reminder that you need to be able to read notes using up to 3 ledger lines on any stave. But what about those notes beyond 3 ledger lines? Those notes right at the extreme ends of the piano keyboard. Think back for a moment to lesson 3 of unit 6, terms and signs, where you learnt about a dashed horizontal line placed above the stave starting with 8 VA, or the dashed horizontal line below the stave beginning with 8 VB. To write music at extremely high pitch or extremely low pitch, you can write the notes in the wrong octave, 1 octave further in towards the keyboard, and then correct them with these signs, like this, or like this, saving on quite a bit of ink and also making it very, very much easier to read the notes. Okay, in this lesson we're going to look at how to read 2 new clefs, the alto clef and the tenor clef. These new clefs are called C clefs because the middle of them shows the line where middle C is written. Here is the alto clef. The middle line is C, and from that knowledge we can extend outwards to cover the lines and spaces. The lines of the alto clef from bottom upwards are F, A, C, E and G. I tend to remember this by saying face egg. And again, as with previous clefs, you could hold your hand up with the palm facing you and starting with the pinky and say F-A-C-E egg. Similarly, the spaces are bottom upwards, G, B, D and F. I'll admit here that I've never bothered creating a sentence to help me with this, but if you need to make one for G, B, D, F, then go ahead, make one if it helps you. The only instrument nowadays using the alto clef is the viola, and it does so because if it used either the treble or the bass clefs, it would end up having to use an awful lot of ledger lines for notes it uses commonly. Here are the notes of the viola shown on the treble clef, on the bass clef, and now on the alto clef, and you'll see how much easier it is to read, just so long as you actually understand how to read the alto clef. Don't forget that you will need to be able to cope with as many as 3 ledger lines above or below staves. However, the lowest note the viola can play is the C below middle C, which sits just below the first low ledger line. So you should actually never ever see an alto stave with more than 1 ledger line beneath it. However, I wouldn't put it past the examiners to throw one in all the same. Music for alto voices in choirs used to use the alto clef, but nowadays they tend to use the treble clef. The tenor clef, which once used to be used to notate tenor voices in choirs, is now used only by trombone, bassoon and cello in their higher registers as a means of avoiding loads of ledger lines above the bass stave that they more commonly use. Again, it shows where middle C is, and in this case it is placed on the 4th line from the bottom, meaning that the lines are D, F, A, C, E, or, as I tend to remember them, D-face. Again, I've never bothered to create any sentence to help remember the spaces, which are E, G, B and D. And again, because the tenor clef is used to help cellists, trombonists and bassoonists in their higher register, you're very unlikely in practice to see ledger lines below the tenor stave, as the composer is more likely to use the bass clef there. However, this is not always the case, so learn them. Tchaikovsky, for instance, wrote his tenor trombones entirely in the tenor clef in some compositions, so used ledger lines above and below. Make sure you learn the range of notes involving up to 3 ledger lines above and below the stave, even if you know you'll never need that knowledge once you've passed your grade 5 theory. Now for a very important matter indeed, regardless of whether we're using the treble, alto, tenor or bass clefs. So far, I have very deliberately ignored the question of how to notate the black keys on a keyboard. Of course, if you've come here as a singer, string, woodwind or brass player, you'll be able to tell me that there are no black keys on your instruments. So it's no bad idea to look at the issue of sharps and flats and naturals without necessarily thinking about the layout of a piano keyboard. Sharps, flats and naturals which appear in the course of a piece of music are called accidentals, and they are always placed before the note they affect. This is a sharp sign. When placed before a note, it raises the note by a semitone. In other words, to the note immediately higher, so it makes the note sound higher. This is a flat sign. When placed before a note, it lowers the note by a semitone. In other words, to the note immediately lower, so it makes the note sound lower. And this is a natural sign. When placed before a note, it cancels out any sharp or flat sign which has been affecting that note. In other words, it cancels out a previous accidental, a sharp or a flat, or it cancels out a sharp or flat in the key signature at the beginning of the stave after the clef. Now, I've just mentioned key signatures, and you'll probably know that a key signature is that collection of either sharps or flats at the beginning of a line of music, which tells you to automatically sharpen or flatten notes. There'll be far more information regarding key signatures in Unit 3 lessons when we look in closer details at keys and scales. There are a couple of really important rules regarding accidentals. Firstly, an accidental will change not just the note to which it is attached, but also all notes of the same pitch following within the same bar. However, the accidental does not change notes with the same name, but in different octaves. That is really important to know. Secondly, a bar line cancels out any accidentals. Now, what I've just been telling you is grade 1 theory, but what follows is definitely grade 4 to 5 theory. Firstly, you'll have realized long ago, I hope, that a black key on the keyboard can have 2 names. For example, F sharp can also be called G flat, or B flat can also be called A sharp. The reason for choosing which name is a little complicated for the time being, so wait until Unit 3 lessons where it will be explained fully. But one important point is that there are some white keys that can also be called something flat or something sharp. Have a look at the white key F. It is a semitone higher than E, therefore it could be called E sharp. In the same way, E is a semitone lower than F, so it could be called F flat. In the same way, C can be called B sharp and B can be called C flat. Not all sharps and flats are black keys on a keyboard. There's an important word to describe this that you must know. Notes with different names but which sound the same are said to be enharmonic. So F sharp and G flat are enharmonic. The enharmonic equivalent of D flat is C sharp, etc., etc. Learn that word, enharmonic. To make your head spin even faster at the seeming absurdity of music theory, it is also possible to double flatten a note using this sign, and to double sharpen a note using this sign. Double flats are comparatively rare, but double sharps are more common, which is perhaps why there is a special sign for double sharp, but double flat is just two flat signs next to each other. Have a look at this scale, the harmonic minor scale of G sharp. The key signature has 5 sharps in it, so F, C, G, D and A are all sharpened. So the scale goes G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, D sharp, E, and now there's a problem. The next note sounds like a G natural, and it is played using the G key on the piano. And then G sharp at the top. But there's a rule saying that a major or minor scale has to include all letters of the alphabet. So we cannot go E, G natural, G sharp, because there is no F. The solution is to call the G natural F double sharp, E, F double sharp, G sharp. Don't worry too much about this at the moment. All will be explained in Unit 3. Just remember that double flats and double sharps follow the same rules as other accidentals, which I will recap again here. Firstly, an accidental will change not just the note to which it is attached, but also all notes of the same pitch, following within the same bar. Secondly, a bar line cancels out the accidental. And to recap further on that new word enharmonic, every note in the octave, with the single exception of the middle black key in that group of 3 on the keyboard, G sharp or A flat, can have not 2 but 3 names. Take as an example C. It can be called C or B sharp, or even D double flat. And that black key between D and E can be called D sharp, E flat, or even F double flat. Why anyone would want to call it F double flat is beyond me. So do not let this worry you. Just accept it. We've now reached a sensible point to stop our investigations regarding pitch for the time being. Further lessons in this unit will look at transpositions of notes and melodies, up and down octaves, or other intervals. But before we go there, it's a really good idea to look at Unit 3, Keys and Scales. Before you go there, It's a really good idea though to make sure you have a good practical foundation in your scales on your instruments. Obviously, I write this guide to theory as a piano teacher and encourage you to visit the scales part of my website. It's a really good idea to know all your scales, so it is a good idea to visit this page to make sure that you can play all 12 major scales, all 12 harmonic minor scales, and ideally, since you're heading towards grades 6 to 8, all 12 melodic minor scales too, even if piano mightn't be your main instrument, or even if you're doing the performance grade online assessment where you are not tested on scales. See you soon.